Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, and Desmond Ritter are from the 2022 quarterback class, and they're all positioned to be starters in 2023. How has the Steelers, Commanders, and Falcons built things around them? We're grading and evaluating those situations today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, and a big welcome to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Happy Joe and Kyle take on second-year quarterback situations day on Friday, May 19th, 2023. To you, Joseph.
Man, I thought this was going to be more of a celebration of the Panthers win. And,
Vamos Gatos, baby!
And what was the other? There was another big one. The
Heat?
The Heat beat the Celtics, right?
Yeah. South Florida sports having a hell of a spring.
Wow. Setting the tone here. Maybe this is going to be like Tampa that year. They had all that success.
It was the Lightning, the Rays
Bucks
played in the World Series, and the Bucks won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we'll see.
That'd be pretty cool.
Would it?
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, it'd be pretty cool. But just as a newfound hockey fan, I have to be completely honest. I did not stay up for 4 overtimes.
Oh God, is that what happened? I have no idea. I saw your tweet at 5:30 this morning, and
Panthers played in Raleigh, which I learned yesterday that Carolina plays in Raleigh. I thought it was Columbia, South Carolina.
Dude, we literally had this conversation.
I know we did. That's what I'm acknowledging our conversation as the reason why I found out.
Which is crazy because most people think they play in Charlotte. Then there's people that think they play in Greensboro, but they actually play in Raleigh. But somehow you were on Columbia, South Carolina?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to see how long the drive is to Raleigh for game 2. Might have to go. I don't know.
Oh gosh, hey, if you go, I'll meet you there.
Okay, great. That's a shorter drive for you than it is for me. I'll tell you that.
Hours for me. I get up there.
But yeah, they went down 1-0 in the first period on kind of a BS cross-check penalty. So they had a 5-on-3 and they killed it until there were 3 seconds left. And then Florida scored 2 goals in like 2 minutes in the second period, and then Carolina tied it. And then they went to 4 overtimes. And with 15 seconds left in the 4th overtime, Carolina turned it over in their own zone, and Florida scored. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
You're a resilient bunch, man.
Hey, you got to hand it to hockey, man. They're like, you commit a penalty, you got to play with less players.
Right.
That's crazy. Imagine jumping off sides. Got to go with 10.
Right. Play with 10 on this down, guys. Sorry.
Like, wait, what? This is no longer the same game.
Yeah, a little different experience with penalties, but we won't bore anyone with any more hockey talk. We'll get into these second-year quarterbacks. Of course, we did the teams of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Washington Commanders, and the Atlanta Falcons over the course of the last few days here on the show. And the objective is to grade out, in accordance to 6 different categories, each of these second-year quarterbacks and their situation, aka how well did the team do to build around them, and then put that number of that grade across those 6 categories into historical context by looking back at the scores that Joe and I have given rookie quarterbacks in the past.
Let's do it.
Starting with Kenny Pickett, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers, Joe.
Yep, so we got the categories: coaching, quarterback room, run game, offensive line, pass catchers, and defense. We'll start with coaching here with Kenny Pickett. Mike Tomlin, obviously, pretty experienced NFL head coach. Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator, returning for a second season with Pickett. Mike Sullivan's the quarterback's coach here. Spent time in Tampa with Josh Freeman, also with the Giants and Eli Manning. Not like rookie version of Eli Manning, but kind of late-stage Eli Manning. Was with the Broncos in 2018. It was actually out of coaching in 19 and 20, came back. And then they also have I had to shout out David Corley, who's in his second season in the NFL, and he's a William and Mary guy.
Okay. I was
if
wondering where we were going with that one.
Dude, McDermott and Tomlin are if there's a William and Mary guy that has a chance in the NFL, they're going to these teams. So we'll stay tuned here on David Corley.
So I gave this a 4 out of 5. And the reason I gave it a 4 out of 5 is because I feel like Mike Tomlin gives you a certain floor. Mm-hmm. And if you were just grading on the head coach, Mike Tomlin would probably be a 5. Like, Tomlin's the coach that if he continues coaching into his mid-60s, he's a guy who has a legit chance to chase down like the wins record type of success is what he's had in his first 15 years or so as an NFL head coach.
And he loves it, dude.
And
we see him every year at the Senior Bowl, man. And he is as engaged and enthusiastic on the field, just chopping it up.
He's not down there to slam beers.
Dude, nothing like Mike Tomlin on the field at the Senior Bowl. In case you thought he was running out of gas. He ain't.
But
yeah,
when your OC's Matt Canada,
brings it down.
I can't give you a 5 no matter how good Mike Tomlin is. So I gave this a 4. I think it's obviously the track record of coaching speaks for itself with the success that Pittsburgh has annually had. Is it an ideal coaching staff for a young quarterback to maximize him? Probably not. I know there were a lot of Steelers fans that were hopeful for a transition at the end of last season with the offensive play caller. They bring Matt Canada back. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil that you don't. I get it. You could also certainly do worse. We saw what the Dolphins did in 2021 and what the Patriots did last year from an offensive coaching staff perspective. So, continuity is not a bad thing. I gave it a 4. Tomlin gives you a high floor, but Canada prevents me from maxing it out.
All right, I gave it a 3.5, and here's the logic behind my math. I too agree with you on Mike Tomlin. He sets the bar really, really high. So I put it at 4.5, right, with Mike Tomlin only. A half-point dock because he's defensive-minded, but I kind of love the idea of Mike Tomlin working with your rookie quarterback or your young quarterback. I think it's a good thing. So we're at a 4.5. Matt Canada brings it down to a 3. All right, I think that's a hit, and then it goes back up. Courtesy
because you have a William and Mary guy on staff.
Well, Mike Sullivan, I think I like his background as a quarterback's coach, the assistant quarterback coach. The William and Mary guy can never go wrong there. That brings it back up to what I give it a 3.5. 3.5.
Yeah. Now, case in point, just 4 is tied for the best of any of the coaches that I gave in the rookie class. I gave the coaching in Carolina a 4. I gave the coaching in Indianapolis a 3. I gave the coaching in Houston a 2. And if you're wondering why I gave those numbers, that'd be a great excuse to go back to last Friday's episode and listen. Joe, a 3.5 is the second best score that you gave out of coaches that we've done, including the rookies from last week, behind Carolina with all of the accomplished coaches that Carolina has assembled on their staff offensively.
Quarterback room here is Mitch Trubisky, the newly extended Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah.
My guy has settled in. He settled in. He said, you know what? I'm going to be the backup in Pittsburgh. I love what's happening with my life right now. And obviously they think he's an important member of this quarterback room. They actually brought back Mason Rudolph as well to go with Tanner Morgan. I kind of like the dynamics of this room. I gave it a 4.
I like the dynamics of this room as well. I just happen to give it a 3.5.
Okay. And as a reminder to those listening, 3 is perfectly average, 4 is above average, 5 is like perfect. 2 is
I would say 4
average,
is good. I would say 4 is good, and 3.5 is above average.
Okay, so Kyle thinks it's
above
average.
And then 4.5 is excellent, and then 5 is utopia.
Well, I gave it a 4 because I think it's.
So you think it's great?
I do. I really like it.
It's a great quarterback room.
I mean, if you extend Trubisky.
Or good. You think it's good.
Like, you must think he is really important for that quarterback room and preparing Kenny and all that that means.
What I like about Trubisky is with what you saw with Kenny Pickett last year, I think there's an ample amount of overlap between stylistically how they play the game.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, obviously, Trubisky, from a decision-making and accuracy perspective, is where you hope Kenny Pickett shows growth. But I think if you have to play Trubisky, you don't have to change too much of the offense. And because they're like-minded, what Mitch Trubisky has gone through can, I think, be helpful for Kenny Pickett. I would just aspire to have a more accomplished backup veteran than what Mitch Trubisky.
He started like 50 games, man.
He did, and he wasn't particularly good after the first 20. It was actually quite bad.
Yikes. Trubisky slander.
And nobody loved Mitch Trubisky coming out of North Carolina more than me when I watched him go on the road and beat Florida State in that 2-minute offense situation.
This is an MVP, man.
Anyway. Running game.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some acknowledgement of the tight ends and the offensive line, although offensive line is its own separate group. Najee Harris, your primary running. Jalen Warren flashed big time last year in a complimentary role. Joe, I gave this 3.25. I think it's marginally above average. I think Najee Harris probably shows a little bit more like the player that was worthy of a top 25 pick this year with the improvements along the offensive line. But I also can't sit here and ignore how inefficient from a per carry perspective he's been through his first 2 seasons as an NFL player.
It's funny because I feel like I come in with a better perspective but a slightly lower grade. Or I got not a better perspective, a more optimistic perspective.
Go ahead, better perspective. Tell me why.
No, that's not what. No, so this is my thought. I gave it a 3, and I might talk myself into a higher grade here by the time I finish my analysis. Thinking back to the film that we watched on this unit, acknowledging that the left side we believe, or at least I believe, is better this year.
Significantly better.
Mason Cole, James Daniels, second season in the system in playing next to each other. But I remember watching whether it was Najee, Benny Snell, Warren, they all had really good moments running the football. And I thought, so I feel like with a better left side in some of those flashes and maybe a more dynamic passing game with consistency, like this running game could be even better. So I came in here giving it a 3, and I'm coming out of here giving it a 3.5. So that's my final.
Okay. And that the question I was going to ask you is you also gave a 3 to Carolina.
Yeah, I got to bump it up.
And I was going to ask you, would you put Najee and the complementary pieces on the same level skill-wise while acknowledging that there's situational stuff that Miles Sanders had a phenomenal year last year as the second running option to Jalen Hurts behind the best offensive line in football, right? So that was the tiebreaker for me is I also gave a 3 to Carolina, and I wanted the grade to reflect a better situation than what Carolina has in their running game. Offensive line. We've kind of glossed over the addition. Broderick Jones, obviously, with the acquisition via the trade. They signed Isaac Seumalo. Speaking of that Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, one of the best in football. Joe kind of ran the gambit on the right side of the offensive line already. That puts Dan Moore in a position to be your 6th offensive lineman and be a utility player that I think is pretty valuable. You have some experience with your backup interior players, whether that is Kendrick Green, who is a 3rd-round pick, who has kind of gotten some smatters of run and has some center guard flexibility, and then also Kevin Dotson. I was going to say, why can I not think of big old Louisiana there at left guard, but Kevin Dotson, who's been a starter for them as well, intermittently throughout the course of the past few years. So good experience. I think the question is how the left side of the line gels. I'm optimistic about the outlook and how it's going to grade at the end of the year, but at the beginning of the year, because we do have some unknowns, I gave it a 3 out of 5.
See it the same way. 3 for me as well.
Great. You want to do pass catchers?
Yeah, so pass catchers here for the Steelers. Deontay Johnson, the handsomely paid number 1 receiver, yep. George Pickens in year 2, traded for Allen Robinson, and then you kind of have some lottery tickets in Calvin Austin and Miles Boykin. We love Pat Freiermuth, the tight end. Darnell Washington also there, and Najee Harris can catch it a little bit out of the backfield. I gave this a 3. I think that I just don't like the depth. I love the idea of Freiermuth, Johnson, Pickens as your top 3 options. I do want to see all of that mature a little bit. So I think it's a 3 with potential to kind of go up a lot, like we talked about with the offensive line.
I agree with you. I think there's growth to be had. I think the big mystery is what Allen Robinson is going to give you. I think it'd be a little foolhardy to expect too much, but The fact that you have Najee Harris as an involved member of the passing game who's gotten volume. Freiermuth was targeted over 90 times last year, if I remember correctly. 96
Do it again,
times,
baby.
I think.
100 targets for Pat.
Go ahead and run it back. You mentioned Deontay Johnson. You mentioned George Pickens. They also got a couple of the young guys that are kind of, you're waiting to see if there's a breakthrough. What can Calvin Austin get you? I gave it just below a 3. I gave it a 2.75.
Didn't they get Didn't they sign Hakeem Butler this week from the XFL?
They did. Yeah.
So watch it all come together now, baby.
Right. Never doubt a wide receiver when they land in Pittsburgh.
Nope.
It's kind of the general rule of thumb that we've come to accept. Defense.
Defense, yep.
Studs up front. You got a superstar player. They cut Akella Witherspoon this week.
Yep.
But you've got a stud in Minkah Fitzpatrick back there on the back end. Linebacker's a little bit of a question. I think the coaching certainly helps, but I'm not going to give too much grace to the personnel when we already graded coaching separately. So I gave this a 3.25. I wanted it to reflect a better grade than what I gave the Colts and a better grade than both of the defenses that we graded for today. I do think it is marginally better than both of those because of the elite players that it has. So it's an above average unit I would grade it as, but you have to see how the corner situation shakes itself out because there is some unknown there. And you have to see how the linebackers settle in because there's a lot of turnover there, and I think you have some limited players there.
Give it a 3.5. I think it's above average. Man, if you get those guys to be healthy, if Watt's healthy all year, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, some young players there, I think the corners are going to work out well. Because I think you have a nice floor with Levi Wallace and Pat Pete, and then, of course, some upside in Joey Porter. I like what they have cooking. I wish their other safety spot was better. I wish their linebackers were better, but I really like everything else that this unit has. And like you said, they do have some really good coaching on the defensive side. 3.5 for me.
Okay, so we came in deliciously close, Joe. You had a 20.5 for Pittsburgh and Kenny Pickett. I had a 19 3/4 for Pittsburgh. So we will contextualize at the very end of the show. We'll pull up the chart and you can see how we graded all the three of the units and how they compare to other recent grades. But Joe, pretty close grade here, which would be to be expected because we saw this team pretty similarly.
All right, we're going to get into Sam Howell here in just a moment.
Speaking of pretty delicious.
Pretty delicious is Built Bars. Kyle, you know what I did before we recorded. I ate a Built Bar. We're enjoying the birthday cake puffs. These are actually covered in white chocolate. They are awesome. There's sprinkles on them. And just like every Built Bar, they're delicious. They have so many great flavors, whether it's the birthday cake puff or the red velvet cake puff that I cannot wait to arrive at my house. Brownie batter, churro, you name it. They've got a great flavor. And it's like eating a candy bar, but they're good for you. They're low in sugar. They're low in calories. They're high in protein. This bar right here, 150 calories, 16 grams of sugar, 16 grams of protein, 7 grams of sugar. Those macros are off the charts.
Stealing.
So check them out. Go to built.com, order yourself a box. Use our promo code LOCKEDON15. It'll get you 15% off your next order. Or you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up a box off the shelf. Folks, find out what all the hype is about. I think you're really going to like it.
Washington Commanders, our second team with Sam Howell. Do we want to start with coaching?
Yeah. Ron Rivera, Eric Bieniemy.
Bieniemy's the selling point here.
Oh, because their quarterback coach is the complete wild card. He's a first-year guy, Tavita Pritchard. Was only ever at Stanford. He was there since like 2010, various jobs, working his way up, and now he's Sam Howell's quarterback's coach. But yes, the redeeming quality here is Eric Bieniemy as the leader of this offense.
All right, I just came down a half a point.
It's all about EB.
Right. Eric Bieniemy is the only thing that gets you excited. Obviously, Ron Rivera was the head coach in Carolina with a very successful quarterback in Cam Newton. But Sam Howell ain't Cam Newton. I don't care how mobile he is. I don't care that he runs around. I don't care that he's pretty stocky for a guy of his stat. I don't care. He's not Cam Newton.
And I'm not sure Ron Rivera was great for Cam either.
Right. We kind of ran him into the ground at times.
Right.
In spite of all those running backs that we had, and D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan
Stewart,
Jonathan
and
Stewart,
Mike
thank
Tolbert, Cameron Artis-Payne.
Right. And Cam
paying
still
all
toting
these
the ball.
guys.
Cam still toting the ball 200 times.
Insane. But also just a weird mesh of personalities, too. Like, I don't think they ever loved each other.
Yeah, I can see that.
They benched him because he didn't wear a tie on the plane, man. Like, come on, dude.
So for Bieniemy, I don't want to. I know we're.
Don't get me
do you
going
want to
on
drop?
Rivera.
Do you want to drop the Ron Rivera stat?
No. I've said it enough. It's getting worse every year.
Okay. Bieniemy has the potential to really have this offense boom, but he is a little bit of an unknown because he hasn't been the play caller beyond Andy Reid.
There's a person here that's redeeming on this staff. It's Ken Zampese, who early 2000s Rams, early Carson Palmer Bengals. Like, he's another player on this staff or a coach on this staff that's worth mentioning here when it comes to offense.
I gave
an
it an
advisory role.
I gave it a 3.
All right. What did I give it? I got to go back. I gave it a 3.
You gave it a 3.
Eric Bieniemy, baby. Let's go.
We're banking on you being good, Eric. Because if you're not, this is worse. This is significantly worse than a 3. I'm going to tell you.
Man, imagine if it was Scott Turner again.
No, can't.
We've upgraded. Hey, that's the good news here. We upgraded an offensive coordinator.
We did. So the quarterback room, bring in Jacoby Brissett. You bounce Taylor Heineke. You bounce Carson Wentz. You bring in Jacoby Brissett as your primary backup player. Career journeyman, mid-round pick, stable hand, limited player. I certainly think Howell gives you more from an off-structure perspective. So I think having that kind of veteran presence is valuable. I gave this a 3.5. I don't love it too much just because for the development of Sam Howell, if Sam Howell struggles in September, are you going to hear people in the media start asking for Jacoby Brissett to be the starter in October?
There's no question. Yeah,
which in my mind is an element of having the right chemistry of a quarterback room that does make it a little volatile when you have such an unproven player.
Yeah, I mean, this is a 5th-round pick, started one game, and I mean, there's not that much there that moves the needle for me. I think there's a good chance you do get that moment where Sam Howell has some struggles, and it's like, well, Jacoby Brissett was kind of good for the Browns last year.
Right.
Let's put that guy in the lineup.
For a team
I think
that's going to run the ball and had a good wide receiver in Amari Cooper, and you'll hear it. If Sam doesn't play well right off the jump, you'll hear it.
In Brissett,
which hurts this room in my mind.
Right. So if you can isolate it to Brissett being an asset for Sam Howell as great depth, okay, love it. But those dynamics could get dicey. I gave it a 3.25 because I do really like Jacoby Brissett.
And I gave it a 3.5.
All right. Next up is
run game.
Run game.
So you have Brian Robinson, second-year player. You have Antonio Gibson, mystery box extraordinaire. You never know what you're going to get. You have a day 3 selection in Chris Rodriguez Jr., who I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, second highest leading rusher in Kentucky Wildcats history. Is that correct?
Is Benny Snell number 1?
I believe so.
Well, here we are, rabbit hole of Kentucky.
No, I'm going to float around, produce this thing. You can talk about the running game in Washington. Yeah,
you know what? I give it a 2.5 here. I think this is a tick below average. There's question marks that I have about this offensive line at center, at right guard. What does Norwell and Leno look like on the left side? I mean, it's fair question marks. And then a second year back in Brian Robinson that I'd like, but is still establishing himself in the NFL. And like, what else do we have? I mean, Gibson can catch the ball. Rodriguez can be a downhill, between the tackles runner, but I think there's enough questions here for me to say, you know what, I don't think this is average. Right now, I think it's fair to say it's a tick below, and I gave it a 2.5.
Well, and there's also a little bit of mystery in how Brian Robinson is going to assimilate to Eric Bieniemy's offense. We don't know what that's going to look like, right?
Yeah.
Now, you think about who have been the successful backs in Kansas City. And do they look like Brian Robinson? Do they play like Brian Robinson?
It's just guys, though, right? Like, they've never had a dude.
Right. The only guy that they tried to make be the guy was Clyde Edwards-Helaire when they drafted him, and the ancillary dynamics of playing the position have not been successful.
Yeah.
Point of clarification, Chris Rodriguez third all-time on the Kentucky program leading rushers list behind Benny Snell and Sonny Collins.
Oh, Sonny Collins. No idea. When did he play?
72 to 75.
Yeah. That's why I'm not well familiar with Mr. Collins.
And Rodriguez second on the rushing touchdowns list with 33 career rushing touchdowns behind Benny Snell's 48.
But you kind of wish they had a back that offered something different here too.
Yeah, like
who's
what they
winning
had.
The edge? Who's winning the edge on this backfield?
They're just going to run at you. They're going to spread you out and run at you.
That's a limited way to run the football.
It is. Which is why I also gave it a 2.5 out of 5. I agree with you. It's a moderately below average, but that doesn't mean I don't like what they have in Brian Robinson. I'm curious how he's going to fit within structurally what they're going to do. Offensive line. I think the left side of your line is regressing in Charles Leno and Andrew Norwell. I do like that you went out and got a potential replacement starter so you can have a little bit more consistency there in the middle. But is a third-round rookie out of Arkansas and Ricky Stromberg going to provide you with the steady hand? You're moving Sam Cosmi over to guard. I'm coming down. I'm giving this a 2. And the new right tackle. This is a 2. And I like some of the pieces, right? Like Norwell's still an adequate level starter. Andrew Wiley coming in already knowing the system because he played in Kansas City with Bieniemy. I think that's really valuable. But I just think there's too much overturn with a new system, with some of your more consistent presences on the left side being players that I think are as they're aging, getting worse. So I have to come down. I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5.
Coming down 2. I'm giving it a 2 as well. I have too many questions. Like the entire, you can ask yourself a legitimate question about all 5 projected starters.
I feel pretty good about Andrew Wiley.
Still a new situation, right? Like that's right, probably the one.
And he's going to be playing next to a guy who's
never played right guard with any level. Like I mean, what he has 65 snaps there last year. Like one game he played there.
He had a smattering of exposure to it last year.
He's got a tackle body.
It's a little unnerving.
Right.
Okay, so that's offense. So now we got to go pass catchers.
Pass catcher, yes.
Got studs on the outside.
Oh boy, yes we do.
I don't like Logan Thomas.
Why, you don't have to whisper that. I mean, he had like one decent year.
I know, but last November you'd give a tight end to Washington in the mock draft, and they'd be like, "Oh, we got Logan Thomas, we're fine."
Oh, well, I think now they'd like a tight end.
I'm sure they would. I feel like the play of Dotson and McLaurin, though, with a quality depth option in Curtis Samuel, who can be a manufactured touch type player. They're obviously invested significantly in all of those players with the money that they're paying Samuel this year, the money that they're paying McLaurin this year, where they drafted Jahan Dotson. They trade up for Jahan Dotson, is that correct? Do I remember that correctly?
I don't know, maybe.
I'll do my research on that after I finish my thought here. I gave this a 3.5. I think the wide receiver room is very, very good, but the other components are not.
Yeah, I'm with you on the receiver room, and it's a lot like, okay, take this in proper context.
Don't do whatever you're going to do right now.
It's a lot like that. Like you think about what Sam Howell had to work with at North Carolina, in De'Ami Brown, in Daz Newsome.
Okay, it's not as bad as I thought you were going to go.
In Josh Downs, like quick separation receivers, guys that can get down the field too. I like that. I like that. But yeah, I wish that they had more at tight end for sure. I wish they had maybe a little bit more depth, but Dotson and McLaurin, man, let's go. We can go to war with that. We'll give it a 3.5.
Case in point, just to clarify, I knew a trade was involved, but they went the other way. They had 11 and they traded down to 16 and then drafted Dotson.
Very good.
But they got third and fourth round picks in the same year to go down 5 spots and go get the guy that they were probably going to get anyway.
Yeah, I like that.
You contrast that to the trade market this year. It's pretty fun how year over year trade values can significantly sway the cost to move up or down a handful of spots. I think this was the spot that Olave went. Didn't New Orleans trade up into this spot? Am I remembering that correctly?
Man, you're trying to pull from the memory bank right now on things I wasn't prepared to get into. Maybe they did.
It was. Yes.
Okay.
Garrett Wilson went at 10. New Orleans traded up to 11 for Chris Olave, and then Jamison Williams went, and then Jahad Dotson went at 16.
Receiver runs are really real. We saw it
Right.
that year.
Just, when are they going to start? By the way, Treylon Burks went 2 picks after Dotson at 18.
So there you go. Wow. Half of the teams was receivers.
Okay. I won't ask about the 2022 draft anymore.
Here it comes. So be ready for it. Defense.
Oh, didn't Washington trade up for Derek Forrest in last year's draft, Joe?
Yeah, let's spend 10 minutes on it. Okay, so Washington's defense, there's a lot of potential. There's certainly talent here. There's first-round picks all over the friggin' place. And for me, though, like I got to see it with the defense. I got to see Chase Young have some juice. I got to see these linebackers come together. I want to see how this secondary comes together and matures. A lot of young talent there that I like, but what does it look like in a tough division? So a lot of times when I'm trying to grade the defense for this context, this lens of the rookie quarterback, it comes back to like how much can they rely on this unit? I don't know. Like I don't know if I can give it a 3. I got to give it a tick below a 3, which is the average grade. I'm coming to a 2.75.
2 3/4.
Yeah, 2 3/4.
I'm going to give it a 3. I think when you put it through the grading scale that we are grading all of the rosters on, of the teams that we are doing when we do the deep dive, and at the end of the row, we're going to have all 32 teams graded, and it's going to be weighted for positional value, and it's going to give you a grand total number for a power rankings for all 32 teams' rosters. It grades comparably well to the other units that have gotten a 3 from me in this process, and that being it grades out comparably well to Indianapolis. It grades out comparably well to Pittsburgh, although Pittsburgh I did give a little bit of an edge over top of. I think it grades out a little bit worse than Carolina. I gave Carolina 3.5. I'm going to sit with Washington 1/4 of a point behind Pittsburgh and 1/2 a point behind Carolina. I'm going to give it a 3. I do think they have some significant talent to work with here, and because of that, I think it's an average group.
All right,
it's a sufficient
together.
Group. I don't want to say
come
average.
Together.
It's a sufficient group.
It could be awesome.
It
right?
could be really good, yeah. See,
see.
And not even being sarcastic, it could be a very good group.
Right. All right, we continue this Well, what do we have to talk about where we finished here?
You gave Washington a 17 with Sam Howell. It's tied with C.J. Stroud for the lowest of the 2023 situations that we have looked at so far. And I gave Washington a 17.5, which is it's a 1.5 in front of C.J. Stroud's situation in Houston this year, which is the lowest grade that I have given. So we generally have both perceive Stroud's situation in Houston and Howell's situation in Washington as the least fortified of the situations that we have covered so far, and we've done 5, plus now we have to do 1 more with Desmond Ridder.
Coming up after a quick break.
Okay, Joe. Atlanta Falcons. Desmond Ridder started 4 games at the end of the year last year. Arthur Smith, offensive aficionado. I don't want to call him mastermind, right? But wide zone mastermind maybe is probably the best way to put it, for their run schemes are very, very good. Of course, you'll play action pass off of that. What else do you like about this group because of coaches? Because you are a little higher than I am.
Well, I really like Arthur Smith, and I like his ability to elevate quarterback play. So I think that Desmond Ridder is in good hands with him, but also Dave Ragone as the other key member of this staff, spent time with Trubisky, a lot of time with Trubisky in Chicago, And I think that probably sets him up well to influence here with Desmond Ridder. So I got to look at my grade. I don't know what I gave him.
You gave him a 3.
Yeah, I gave it a 3. I mean, there's not a lot of depth here to their coaching staff of needle movers, but I really like the combination of Arthur Smith and Dave Ragone.
So here's where I got stuck with Arthur Smith. It's like Teron Armstead says. The film's a film, right? Falcons have won 7 games in each of the last 2 years.
I'd argue they overachieved winning 7 games based on their talent.
Quarterback play has not been good in either of the last 2 seasons as well.
Matt Ryan in 21 was
okay. Matt Ryan threw for 4,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions in 2020, the year before.
Right, but like he had nothing to work with. I think they overachieved winning 7 games each the last 2 years. Like,
is Arthur Smith on the hot seat?
I think
should Arthur Smith be on the hot seat?
Absolutely.
Okay, then how are you, regardless of whether or not they overachieved, how are you going to give this a glowing grade or a good grade if he's been here for 2 years, they've won the same amount of games, quarterback play has not been good, but that's your justification to give him the grade that you did is because he elevates quarterback play.
Well, we clearly saw him do that with Ryan Tannehill. I thought Matt Ryan maintained a level of play despite tough circumstances, and who was going to get good quarterback play out of Marcus Mariota?
Nobody. But it's what have like, you? I'm viewing him a little bit more from a what have you done for me lately.
You're looking at him from a perspective of the wins that the Atlanta Falcons have. I'm looking at this through this perspective of his impact on Desmond Ridder.
I'm also looking at his track record of 2 years as an offensive coordinator in Tennessee and 2 years as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. If I'm going to hold him against the other situations that we are grading, if he is the centerpiece of the grading for Atlanta's coaching situation, I can't put him in the same bucket as what I gave Eric Bieniemy or what I gave Shane Steichen. I think the work of those other coaches as kind of the centerpiece of why I gave the grade that I did, or like I gave a 4 to Carolina with Frank Reich and Caldwell's on that staff. I think this coaching staff is a step below that. So I gave him a 2.5.
I mean, I gave him a 3, so it's not like I'm sitting here giving it a 4 or a 5.
I'm not saying that you are. I'm just because if you give him a 3, you're putting him in the same bucket as Bieniemy. You're giving him the same grade as what we're giving the Colts staff.
Mm-hmm.
So I just if I looked at it in a volume, I could see where you got a 3. But if I'm putting him in the same conversation of those other coaching staffs, I wouldn't put him in the same tier.
I think we look at Arthur Smith a tick differently.
We'll find out this year.
We shall.
Quarterback room.
What do we got here? Taylor Heineke, Logan Woodside. Taylor Heineke, perfectly good backup quarterback. Logan Woodside, what I like about him is experience in the system, right? I don't think he's a rosterable player in the NFL, but
yeah,
experienced player in the system for, if he's on the practice squad or whatever they plan to do with him. I think it's a reasonable situation. I gave this quarterback room a 3. Average.
Are you worried? I also gave it a 3. I'm even more worried about Jacoby Brissett getting in the way of Sam Howell in Atlanta with Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder.
Similar stuff. Yeah, we even saw it on Twitter yesterday because I tweeted about the Falcons. We did the podcast, and people are like, well, you say all this about Desmond Ridder, but this is probably going to be Taylor Heineke's job. Like, I don't know. Arthur Blank seems to be in on Desmond Ridder being the quarterback here.
That's not a good place to be, by the way. When the owners decided who the quarterback's going to be, that's not the kind of influence that I would want on it for a third-round quarterback. If I'm paying Taylor Heineke up to $8 million a year to be on my roster, and the other guy is a third-year pick who looked the way that Desmond Ridder looked, and he looked fine, but you could tell the training wheels were on the offense, the best dude's going to play. And I think that's a potential roadblock for Desmond Ridder, especially if he doesn't play well early, assuming he is the starter when they kick things off.
Well, and if Arthur Smith's truly in a make-or-break year, he can't sit there and hope Desmond Ridder can figure it out, right?
Right. Especially with how open the South is this year.
there's a good chance that we see Heineke and Brissett starting games this year by choice.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And while that experience is good for the support of the young quarterback, it does take away from the grade that you give it.
Right. All right, so we're both at a 3 here?
Yes.
Okay.
Get excited about this run game, though.
Right. Go ahead.
So we'll get to offensive line in just a minute, but Cordero Patterson, kind of multi-tool weapon to go with a young player in Tyler Algier, who's a big-bodied physical runner, probably a little bit more effective downhill. But then you got Bijan Robinson and his explosiveness in all phases of running the football. On top of that, this is a 4 for me. And if Bijan's what we think he is, I think this could be even higher than that.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You're in a fantasy football draft. You own the number 9 pick. It's a 1-year league.
Bijan.
You drafting Bijan at 9 to see a first-round fantasy pick?
Yes.
Is he really?
Yes. If you're not of the zero running back theory ideology,
yeah, and he's the number 1 pick in dynasty, right? Well, maybe some people would like these quarterbacks, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know Richardson's got a lot of buzz, but
I'd pick Bijan if I had it.
I would pick more of a sure thing.
Yeah,
and they don't get much more sure thing than Bijan Robinson in this system.
Yeah, it's the stable of backs. It's the offensive line. This run game they will be able to lean on. I gave it a 4.
Yep. The offensive line, however, I gave it 4.5, 2. Really excited about Matthew Bergeron stepping in at left guard, but you've got quality starters or better, in my eyes, left tackle, right tackle, and right guard. And you have a left guard potential rookie that I really liked, and then you have a couple of a second and third year player in Hennessy and Dahlman competing for center. That the floor feels pretty high. They've both had starting experience. They are very, very, very good scheme fits. I think this is complementary skill sets mixed with the ideology of how you want to run the ball and what you want to be offensively. And this is married very, very well. And case in point, Matthews has been a staple for a long time. Caleb McGarry was a first-round pick. Chris Lindstrom was a first-round pick. Matthew Bergeron was just drafted in the early second round, before pick 40, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. And then in the last 2 years, they've drafted Dahlman and Hennessy in the first few rounds as well, the third and fourth rounds respectively. So they've invested a lot in the last 4 years or so in this offensive line, and it's paying dividends, and I understand some of that came before Arthur Smith, but he really pulled the best out of Caleb McGarry last year, and this grades as one of the better offensive lines in football in my eyes.
So you give it a 4.5. I give it a 4.25. I see it very, very similarly. I love Bergeron. I had a first-round grade on him. And I think, like, even if he's not ready to go, it's nice knowing you have Hennessy to step in and play.
Yeah.
But, yeah, 4.25 for me.
Okay. Pass catchers?
Yeah, it's just kind of a tough conversation because, like, I love what London and Pitts can be. I don't think they have much depth, right? I think they kind of need Mac Hollins and Scotty Miller to, like, be meaningful. Jonnu Smith, I think, will be productive or more productive than he was in New England, kind of reuniting with Arthur Smith. But I don't know that there's a lot of depth. And for, like, as much as I love Drake London, he's a second-year player that's still kind of maturing in the league. Kyle Pitts didn't have the production last year, you know, like, and there's reasons for that coming off of an injury as well. There's upside here. There's questions here. And so for that, I had to give it a 2.5.
There's a lot of to be determines.
Yeah.
With some of the bigger names, and they don't have depth. So I think the Arthur Smith run game giveth and the Arthur Smith run game taketh away. And the Arthur Smith run game giveth is y'all are really, really equipped to run the football and put your quarterback in a lot of low-stress situations. And you got 8.5 out of a possible 10 points for running the ball on offensive line for me. But that means I'm also going to give you 2.5 in the pass catchers just because the depth is not there. The talent at the top is there, but we got to see more from Drake London. Kyle Pitts has to bounce back and be healthy.
It's not a team that can get behind in games, right?
Right.
Like that's right. Going to be an important dynamic. Is
don't panic if you're down 2 scores in the second quarter, But if you got 20 minutes left in the football game and you need to go the length of the field twice, that's not going to be a situation that's going to work well for you.
It's tough.
Defensively, I gave this a 3. I think the free agent acquisitions of Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell and trading for Jeff Okudah and acquiring Caden Ellis, really excited about how this works together. I do think it is a little bit of a chemistry experiment early on, and because you have so many new faces, I'm a little worried about what the performance will look like early on, but I like the talent. I like the vision. I like how you finally put stuff around Grady Jarrett. I think A.J. Terrell is going to bounce back this year and be the player that we expected him to be coming into 2022, which was not quite to the standard that he previously set. So I give this a 3, but I think by end of this year, this could score higher for Atlanta.
Yeah, I think the arrow's up here. I want to see it all come together. That's kind of my question here. So I give it a 2.75, very close to average, but look, just the way I see it right now, there's a lot of new pieces working together. It can be really, really good, but I still kind of want to see it. So 2.75 for me.
So let's do the grades. I'll pull this up for everybody, and everybody can see how these graded out. Joe, we both had Pittsburgh 1 out of this trio. You gave it a 20.5. I gave it a 19.75. We both had Atlanta at a 19.5. And then you had Washington at a 17. I had Washington at a 17.5. If you look at that through the lens of all of the grades that we have given, oh man, I'm going to have to reframe just a little bit, Joe.
That's my cue to start talking.
Yeah, that's your cue to start talking because I got to make sure everybody can see the full sheet. Well,
I'll remind everyone of Kyle's monologue last week about the correlation of our grades here to wins and losses as evidenced on the great machine testing that you were able to pull off.
Chat GPT. I call it Chat GTP, but it's Chat GPT.
That's football. That's GT counter. It's when you
right.
say
it's ingrained in my head.
Yeah.
So I do have it reframed. So thank you. Yes, if you don't like it, just please bear in mind that there is a strong correlation across several scientific tests of significance with data sets that are designed for large data samples and smaller data samples between wins and the grade of the situation that we have given. Now, obviously, we have a lot more. We're up to 17 situations that we have graded, Joe, and you can see in yellow, the ones that are lightly yellow are the 2023 grades that we have given out. So, Joe, Bryce Young 2023 remains the third best situation that you have graded across 2 years. Kenny Pickett, which we did today, is the fifth best situation that you have graded across the last 2 years.
I like that. That's good news for them. If you're a Panthers fan or a Steelers fan, you like hearing that.
Correct. And Howell and Stroud are tied for you for the worst out of this year's group, but we have seen much worse situations, case in point by the 2021 Zach Wilson grade that you gave out and the Justin Fields 2022 grade that you gave out.
Correct. This is not about what you just said, but I'm looking at Kenny Pickett and seeing him go from a 16 that I gave him in 2022 to a 20.5 in 2023. That's what's really kind of fun, is being able to measure how they've improved these situations year over year, and that really pops for me.
And I have Kenny Pickett up 1/4 point. So I had him at a 19.5 last year.
So your starting point was much higher.
My starting point was higher, but I do have him as a better situation as well.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really fun to see how that Pittsburgh team does. That AFC North is going to be highly competitive. But I think that's the thing that stands out, Joe, is we've had some pretty extreme polls. Mac Jones 2021 was a 23.5 for me and a 24.5 for you. Trey Lance 2021 was a 23 for me and a 24 for you. And then we already mentioned the 2021 Zach Wilson, 2022 Justin Fields is. Everything feels like it's, especially for me and my tiering, middle of the pack. There's not like head and shoulders good situations to this point in time. Now, we're going to do some situations in the next next week, where we're going to look at Trevor Lawrence 2023, Trey Lance 2023. Well, I guess not Trey Lance, maybe Trey Lance. Justin Fields in another year, Mac Jones in another year, and see how they shake out. And I think that the third data point will those be fun, but I think my favorite stat here, Joe, as we get ready to wrap up the show, is we've done 17 separate situations, and you and I, our average grade is separated by 0.02.
Big week next week to see where we if there's any separation there. How about this one also? Mac Jones, I had as a 24.5 in 2021, went 10-7 as a starter. 2022, I had him down to a 19, so a pretty steep drop, right? That's 5.5 points, Draft Dudes do math, if I'm correct there.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Goes down to 6-8. In his second season, after a 10-7 playoff appearance. Something to this, man.
I have a feeling we're going to see Trevor Lawrence up there quite a bit this time around. But that's for next week. So you're going to have to make sure you hit subscribe. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Joe apparently dipped out early, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, appreciate the everydayers who are locked in on a daily basis. Hope that you'll hit subscribe. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Come on back and see us again next week. Enjoy the weekend. Peace.